In this video, we'll learn how to create a cost plus prime invoice. This process is the same for cost plus prime contracts with or without a guaranteed maximum price. We need to have a couple of items in place before we create a cost plus prime invoice. First, we need approved cost transactions entered and ready to import to the prime invoice so that we can select them to include on the invoice. Without cost transactions, we can't create an invoice for costs. For cost plus prime contracts, we'll also need to have the default invoice markups set up on the prime contract. In this video, we'll talk about how to add a cost plus prime invoice when costs are already present. We'll talk much more about the different transaction types in upcoming lessons. We'll open Mountain Park Plaza and scroll down to the project menu. The following costs are what gets imported into the invoice: bills, sub-invoices, labor time cards, equipment time cards, and miscellaneous expenses. Next, the prime contract must have an approved status and status date. Any transaction included on prime invoices must be dated on or after the approved status date of the prime contract. Under Client Contract Admin in the project menu, select the Prime Contracts link. Although we have two cost plus contracts, let's open contract number 2, which is without guaranteed maximum price, or GMP as it is also known. We'll scroll down to the section labeled Project Information linked to Prime Contract. On cost plus prime contracts, with or without guaranteed maximum price, we can add default markups for invoices. We covered how to add default markups for cost plus prime invoices in earlier videos. Click the link to verify that the default markups have been set up. They are set up, so using the breadcrumbs menu, let's return to the project homepage. If we plan to bill for prime change orders, in addition to the prime contract original items, we'll want to confirm that any prime change orders are completed and approved before we initiate the prime invoice wizard. We'll talk all about change management in an upcoming lesson, so let's skip this step for now. Before we create a cost plus prime invoice, we'll want to view a list of unbilled transactions so we can determine which of these we'll include on the invoice. In the project menu below, select Prime Invoice, and then Reports in the upper right-hand corner. Notice the project is already selected. We'll go over this reports window in detail in upcoming videos. For now, we'll select the report subcategory of prime invoices. Under the Standard Reports tab, we'll select the report labeled Cost plus Unbilled Summary by contract and transaction type. For better viewing, let's use screen prints for our review of this 2-page report. Cost plus prime invoices can include several transaction types, and we have examples of each type in this report. For all types, the date of the transaction must be later than the approved status on the prime contract, and it must be prior to the bill through date of the prime invoice. Labor time cards include hours worked by employees of our organization, or by external workers for whose labor we're billing directly. Hours are applied to specific cost codes from the prime contract, and the number of hours worked is tracked against the labor hour budget for that cost code. The cost of the labor is tracked against the labor budget for the cost code. Equipment time cards include a given piece of equipment's run time, idle time, and downtime. Each line is applied to a cost code, and all 3 types of time are tracked against the equipment hour budgets. The cost of the equipment is tracked against the equipment budget for the cost code. Miscellaneous expenses are costs incurred by employees that are billable to the job. Miscellaneous expenses can also include costs incurred on corporate-issued credit cards or debit cards. They are applied to specific cost codes and resource types referred to as MLESO, and the amounts are tracked against the budget amount for that cost code and resource type. Subcontractor invoices include line items assigned to specific cost codes on the project, and amounts are tracked against the sub-budget for the cost code. Vendor bills for materials or services are often tied to purchase orders, but that's not a requirement. Bills include line items tied to cost codes and resource type, and are tracked against the budget for the specified cost code and resource type. We've verified the costs we want to bill, so we'll close this report. With everything ready to go to Contract Administration. Next to Prime Invoices, click Add manually. The first screen has the header information. If there were only one Prime contract, it would already be selected for me. For this first example, I'm going to select a Cost Plus contract without GMP. After we select the Prime contract number, most fields are filled in for me. Compare the order number and the invoice number. These are two different things. The order number determines which invoices contribute to the previously invoiced amounts that you'll see for the invoice. Any invoices with an order number lower than the current one will be included, whereas ones with a greater number will not. If you've already entered 3 Prime invoices with order numbers 1, 2, and 3, then the invoice amounts from all 3 will be reflected in the previous total column in the invoice. If you numbered the first 3 invoices 1, 2, and 4, and then later enter an invoice with order number 3, only the first 2 invoices are included in the previous total amounts. You should accept the default order number that Sage Construction Management fills in automatically. If this order number is out of sequence, the previously invoiced totals will be incorrect. In most cases, you might leave the invoice in pending status so the team can review it before approving. But I'll select Approved here. And then select Save and Next in the bottom right corner. In the next window, notice the 4 options. We'll go through an example of the first 3 options in this video. We'll cover option D in the video on invoicing retainage. We'll leave option A selected. This lets us import actual time and expenses, and mark up the transactions based on the transaction type. We might use 1% for labor and equipment time cards, then another percentage for sub-invoices, and so on. Select Next. Based on my transaction cutoff dates, the wizard presents any cost transactions that have already been entered, but not invoiced on previous Prime invoices. This includes time cards, expenses, sub-invoices, and labor bills. I'm going to clear a couple of these transactions because we're going to create another 2 invoices after this one. We can enter markup values in the percentage column for the different transaction types. But remember that any percentages we enter here will be in addition to the default Cost Plus Prime invoice markups we added a few moments ago. Click the Add and Next button. The 2 markups we created earlier are available to import into this invoice, so we'll leave Import selected and click Save and Next. The invoice is saved, and we're taken to the Prime Contract Invoice Information page. If we need to make changes to the header information or add comments to the invoice, we can click Edit. Notice there's a space for comments and another space for internal comments, which would not be viewable by anyone outside the subscriber organization. No changes were made, so we'll click Close. Let's generate a lien waiver and the invoice to send to the project owner. First, click Reports, then Prime Invoice Lien Waiver. Notice that we can select one of the 4 types of lien waivers: conditional progress, unconditional progress, conditional final, or unconditional final. Just a note here, the lien waiver templates provided with Sage Construction Management are only for demonstration. Lien laws vary by state or province, so we shouldn't rely on these sample templates as a legal format. In the video on Prime Invoice settings, I'll show you where you can upload your customized lien waiver formats. We'll select Conditional Progress, and then in the Export option field, we will select Save PDF to linked files. Click OK. Scroll to Linked Files. and click View, which opens the PDF of the lien waiver. If we have DocuSign set up to integrate with Sage Construction Management, we can use one of the DocuSign templates to collect an electronic signature on the lien waiver form. Back at the Prime Contract Invoice information page, let's walk through the process of saving this Prime invoice to linked files, and then email it to the project owner. Select Reports, and then Prime Invoice Details. Notice that several formats are available. We can generate the Prime invoice showing item details, or we can show items grouped or summarized by the different options we see here. Since we'll be sending this to the project owner, we'll select items summed by owner code in this example. We'll leave the default template selected, but we can upload our own Prime invoice formats to settings. Next, on to Export option, select Save PDF to linked files, and then click OK. Now we can scroll down in the Prime invoice to see linked files, and both the invoice and lien waiver are present. Let's send this to the project owner. Before you email the invoice to the project owner, you'll want to preview it to make sure everything is correct. We'll assume we've done that already. Scroll to the top and click Reports in the upper right-hand corner, and then Prime Invoice Details. For the format, we'll select items summed by owner code. For the export option, select Email PDF. This gives an additional line where we can select the email template, and again, we'll leave default selected. Click OK, and we see the Email Prime Invoice window. We can modify the recipients and CC lists. Verify that the Prime invoice and lien waiver will be included as attachments, and scroll down to see the email template. Click Send Email. When the email is sent, a success message is displayed. Also, if we need to check later, we can scroll down in the Prime invoice window to see that the email has been recorded as sent. We just created the Prime invoice using option A, applying markup to items by transaction type. Now let's run through an example using option B. I have Prime invoices in my favorites, so I will use that to go to Prime invoices and click the Actions button in the upper right-hand corner. Select Add manually. Select the Prime contract, and this time we're going to select a Cost Plus Prime contract with GMP, so we can see the different reports. Check the remainder of the information and click Save and Next. This time we'll click option B, Import Actual Expenses and Time Cards with Markup Options by Resource Type, and click Next. This option lets us import actual time and expenses. Notice that each transaction type is broken out into their cost resource types such as labor, equipment, materials, and so on. This allows us to mark up labor at one rate, equipment at another, and so on. Again, any markup percentages we enter here are in addition to the default markups for the invoice, so we'll make some entries and click Add and Next. Note this checkbox. Tag related uploaded expense and time card files to the Prime invoice. This option is a great way to allow the project owner to see all of your documentation for sub-invoices, vendor bills, miscellaneous expenses, and labor and equipment time cards. We'll leave the default invoice markups in place and click Save and Next. My invoice has been saved, and again, we can print the invoice and the lien waiver. I'm going to generate the invoice PDF, and we'll look at the two invoices we just created. The first invoice shows a Cost Plus Prime contract without a GMP, and it shows the header information followed by the list of items. The second invoice was for a Cost Plus Prime contract with a GMP, so the report has a little more information. The first table shows information about the guaranteed maximum price, current and prior invoice totals, and retainage. So just remember, even though we create Cost Plus Prime invoices using the same wizard, the resulting printouts are slightly different. The other difference is that Cost Plus Prime contracts without a GMP will usually not have change orders associated with them, while with a GMP, As we see here, change orders may occur. Back on the project homepage, let's create another invoice and look at option C, which is to import expense types one by one. Let's go to Prime Invoices, and then Actions, and Add Manually. We will select the Prime Contract 002, and then select Save and Next. Now we select option C, and select Next. This takes us through the 5 transaction types one by one. As we go through the wizard, we have separate steps for each of the transaction types: vendor bills, sub-invoices, employee miscellaneous expenses, labor time cards, and equipment time cards. We see each transaction type whether or not unbilled transactions remain. Then we'll select the markups to finish the Prime invoice. In this video, we learned how to create cost plus Prime invoices for cost plus contracts with or without a guaranteed maximum price.